I'm Dr. Dave Janda. Welcome back to Operation Freedom Briefings combined with Dave versus the MSM. I'd like to thank you for joining me today. Thank you for networking these videos. Gosh knows, the social media platforms don't want that to happen. The last thing they want is people to be educated with information they'll never get through the bought-off lamestream fake media. And then, because folks become educated, become empowered. And that's what we're all about. With our radio show, Operation Freedom, with our entire platform at davejanda.com, we have tremendous content for you. Now, the davejanda.com website has been incredibly upgraded, let's put it that way, renovated by Nick and our IT team, more user-friendly. We have tremendous amount of free public information as well as this premium service content subscription service that is information I cannot discuss on social media platforms because Dave would get further, and I cannot discuss on the radio because of the FCC and their choke points, deep state choke points within their system. We go into information on the subscription side that our subscribers will tell you, and not an exaggeration, puts folks months, years, and in some cases over a decade ahead of the curve. So you can prepare yourself, take the necessary steps so that you are protected from the freedom stripping agenda from the cult. Now, many people believe at this point, oh, the cult is done. It's so 2020, 2022, and 3 and 4. No, actually, they're alive and well. And they're not done. Remember, they've been running the show for 100, 150, up to 200 years. And they're just not going to walk or slither. They don't want slither away. No. But one way we can prevent them from making a quick and violent return to power is getting ahead of them, is shutting off their money flow. Now, I cannot say the words of this and this on these platforms, okay? But there is a video I did, it's 4-minute long. It's called Tale of the Tape, okay? And as I mentioned, we tell people years before what's coming, well, and what's going to come out down the line. These Tale of the Tape videos on our website, davejanda.com, are free and are there for you. There's a 4-minute video there about this and this that you need to watch and then share with your family and friends. It's about Dave talking about stuff, and then 4 or 5 years later, whoa, here we are. Here it comes. Right. This is critical because when they lie to you, misinform you, disinform you, propagandize you, there are many sides to that equation that they benefit from. One, it makes you an easier target. But two, it's easier for them to launder money. It's key. That's what this and this was all about. It was a huge, I mean, there were several sides to it, but huge money laundering operation, right? So today's video is about shutting down the gravy train. Because if we shut down the gravy train, they're completely out of ammo. Yeah. Their chaos machine doesn't rev up. It implodes. Calvin Coolidge, 30th President of the United States, said the following. Quote, unless the people through unified action, operative word action, arise and take charge of their government, they will find that their government has taken charge of them. Independence and liberty will be gone, and the general public will find itself in a condition of servitude to an aggregation of organized and selfish interest, end quote. And that's what we've all been living through, right? Many of us have been trying to fight against that chaos-driven cult, globalist cult operation. And frankly, we've been pretty successful right now up to this point. But we need to get more successful. And it comes down to accountability, transparency, and truth. And those three entities melding into what I've called the D words. Disclosure. Yeah, disclosure of what? Well, those files that the cult just don't want you to know about. JFK, RFK, MLK. About 9/11. About this and this. About November 2020. What happened then? About January 6, 2021. About what we call J13. What happened in Butler, PA. You see, disclosure, the truth, transparency, accountability. Well, the perpetrators, all globalist cult players. Well, they end up in front of a jury. And they end up getting sentenced. Disclosure is a big part of this shutting down their gravy train. Disruption of their gravy train is key. And that comes with accountability and transparency and truth. For all of us to be disobedient and defiant, peacefully, but disobedience and defiance is key. And the final D is dedication to freedom. In other words, dedication to every kid in our country and around the world. That they have even more enhanced freedoms than all of us older folks did when we were growing up. Because that should be our legacy to the current young generations and the generations that aren't even born yet. But it all comes down to shutting down their gravy train, shutting down their money spigot, shutting down their money flow. And this is where President Trump and Musk and the DOGistas has stepped up. Follow the money and end their gravy train. And we know this is a problem for them because of how they react. Just look at their reaction to when USAID. Now look, for 14 years on the radio, over 14 years, I've been telling you when you hear USAID, you think CIA. You think intelligence operation. You think of it as a front for the CIA. No. They're not this benevolent entity that is looking out for the welfare of people. No. It's a huge money laundering operation. Which is why when Musk and Trump and DOGE started digging into USAID, they got all hysterical, the cults, right? Oh, the cult puppets. Oh, whether it was on MSDNC or CNN or the New York Times or the Washington Post. Yeah. General McInerney, friend of mine, former fighter pilot, for years has said to me, Dave, with your work, you are over the target when you're getting the most flack. Well, look at the flack. Trump, Musk, the DOGistas, all of us in the independent media have gotten for the exposure of their money laundering operation. Ron Paul, the most honest person I ever met in D.C., and I've been wading through the swamp since I started working on healthcare policy during the Reagan administration in the spring of 1988. It's a lot of years. Yeah, wow. It's a lot of years. Here's what he said. Audit USAID. Transparency, accountability, truth, right? Then shut it down. USAID is not a relief agency. Listen to what he says. It is a key component of the U.S. government's, quote, regime change, end quote, operations worldwide, including here domestically, right? Because we saw money was being funneled into USAID that was used for censorship. Just one of their domestic operations. Wait a minute. The CIA in their charter says they can't be involved in domestic operations. Yeah, so they use a cutout USAID to do the dirty. USAID spends billions of dollars every year propping up non-government organizations, NGOs, overseas and domestically, that function as shadow governments, eating away at elected governments that the U.S. interventionists want to overthrow. Behind most U.S. foreign policy disasters overseas, you will see the fingerprints of USAID, CIA. From Ukraine to Soviet Georgia and far beyond, USAID is meddling in the internal affairs of foreign countries and domestically. Something that would infuriate Americans if it was happening to us. Well, it is happening to us. That's the only part I take issue with him. Now, the cult thought that they could mobilize their compromised judicial system to shut down the accountability and transparency and the truth coming forward about the money laundering activities through USAID, through the intelligence agencies, CIA. But, well, fortunately, we stumbled upon a fairly honest judge. Judge declines to block Trump's move to put thousands of USAID workers on leave. Judge Nichols declined to block the Trump administration's move to place thousands of USAID workers on leave. Well, why? Well, this judge actually read the Constitution. Said, Article 2 of the Constitution is about the power of the executive branch, of which the chief executive is the President of the United States. And the President, according to the Constitution, has the right, the option of hiring and firing who he pleases in the executive branch. Pretty straightforward, eh? Well, when you stick to the Constitution, it is. But the cult, this is why they've been trying to shred the Constitution for decades. It's their enormous speed bump. It's a speed bump to their New World Order and their one world government. It's their speed bump to the destruction of what they want to do, destroy our constitutional republic. Elon Musk stepped up and said, on those DOGE cuts, USAID is a ball of worms, no apple, and we got to get rid of the whole thing. President Trump stated, USAID, it's been run by a bunch of radical lunatics, and we're getting them out, end quote. Yeah. Musk then provided an update. Quote, as we dug into USAID, it became apparent that what we have here is not an apple with a worm in it. But we actually have is just a ball of worms. If you have an apple with a worm in it, you can take the worm out. If you have a whole ball of worms, it's hopeless. USAID is a ball of worms. There is no apple. And when there is no apple, you just need to get rid of the whole thing, and that's why it's got to go. It's beyond repair. Remember, weeks ago I spoke about the disruptors, the DOGistas coming in town, that Washington has never seen a group like this. And remember what I said, and I quoted El Gato Mato from the Brownstone Institute, who said when it comes to the DOGistas, the swamp is not even bringing a knife to a gunfight. The swamp is bringing a dinosaur to a meteor strike. And that's what this has been, a meteor strike. We found out that, when this was in the process of being dissected, Marco Rubio, and it actually kind of surprised me. He's had some globalist ties over the years, but so far, so good, but we still hold all of their feet to the fire, including Rubio's. He came in, so they got over 10,000 employees at USAID. And under President Trump's recommendation. We're going to bring it under the guidance of the State Department. And actually, we've cut down the bureaucrats from 10,000 to 294. Well, we got to make sure those 294 are playing on the same page, right? Apparently, so far so good. But what has been uncovered with we'll call it DOGE transparency, but by the Dogistas, and truth, and accountability, they came up with some interesting findings about the money flow. George Soros' Open Society Foundation, which has been really key with their censorship operations. They've been involved in censoring this guy right here in our content. Through the funding mechanisms, they have their own little fact-checking organizations. They support fact-checking. Censorship vices. George Soros' Open Society Foundations received $260 million boost from USAID. Yeah. Does that surprise anybody? Not you or me, but about 99% of the people are like, what? Really? And it's not just USAID. It's the entire budget process. And remember, what I've told you for 14 and 3/4 years on the radio, one political party in Washington, owned and operated by a criminal syndicate. I call them the Republicrats. And they have benefited from this money laundering because the vast majority of them, about 99%, all have ties, some kind of ties, to the globalist cult. Elon Musk and Congress and the budget bills, right? Because USAID got funded through these folks. So the Republicans were sitting around the whole time going, well, look at all that money going to USAID. I wonder where that's going to. Well, I don't know. Let's go to the Senate and House dining room. They're not innocent in this. They're complicit. I know that's not a popular thing. It's true. Musk on the budget situation. Unless DOGE ends the careers of deceitful pork barrel politicians, the waste and corruption will never stop. Therefore, there is no choice but to do so. I wish there was another way, but there's not. No, there is no other way than transparency, accountability, and truth. So, the dissection started. From 10,000 down to over 10,000 to 294 employees. Caroline Leavitt, who's doing a great job as White House spokesperson, came out and said, let's give you put a little meat on the bones. In addition to good old Georgie Soros and his $260 million. $2.5 million for DEI programs in Serbia, $70,000 on an Irish DEI musical, $47,000 on transgender operas in Colombia, $32,000 on a trans comic book in Peru. Oh, but it was even more than that. Funding for Burisma, that money laundering operation, good old Hunter and Joe. And hey, by the way, the big guy, if you think that remember, in Hunter's laptop, he talked about his dad getting 20%. And then he talked about the big guy getting 10%. What do you think the big guy is? Oh, I know. They're all telling you. Well, it might be Joe Biden. Well, no. It's outlined in Hunter's laptop. We told you this 4 years ago, by the way. Yeah, 4 years ago. Well, 4.5 years ago. Yeah, Joe's getting his 20% cut. But the big guy? The big O. Obama. We were protected Joe during all. This is about protecting Obama. USAID slush fund revealed by Musk, including funding for Burisma, the Wuhan lab. But there are some other ones. $20 million for a new Sesame Street show in Iraq. $4.5 million to combat disinformation in Kazakhstan. $1.5 million for the art of inclusion of people with disabilities. $6 million to transform digital spaces to reflect feminist democratic principles. $2.1 million to help the BBC. $10 million worth of funding to Al Qaeda. Remember, what did I tell you about Al Qaeda? Always think of them as, just as USAID was a front for the CIA. I've always called them. What have I always called them? Ding, ding, ding. You're right. Al Qaeda. Yeah. $6 million for tourism in Egypt. $2.5 million to promote inclusion in Vietnam. About $5 million to Eco Health Alliance, one of the key NGOs funding that bat research, the Wuhan lab. $1.1 million to an Armenian LGBT group. $1.3 million to Jewish and Arab photographers. $1.5 million to rebuild the Cuban media ecosystem. $3.9 million for LGBT causes in the Western Balkans. $8.3 million for USAID's education program of equity and inclusion. USAID's climate strategy outlined a $150 billion whole-of-agency approach to building an equitable world with net zero greenhouse gas emissions. All that has now been put, thanks to President Trump, Elon Musk, and the DOGistas, on the back burner. But we can't stop there. There are many other agencies, many other departments that need to be dissected of their money flow. But as the dissection continues, and I believe it will, you are going to see a government that is transformed. Some people believe it could well be fairly obliterated. Well, look, let's think of what's happened over the past 150 years or so of the old management team running the show. Have they been wonderful benefactors? No. They've done everything in their power to siphon as much money out of the system, harm as many people as possible, create as much chaos and wars and death and destruction as possible. Right now, we have a new management team making its entrance. And we have to make sure, and so far so good, because they focused on accountability and transparency and truth. But we have to hold their feet to the fire and make sure that that continues. Because with accountability, transparency, and truth, every person in the world who's honest and hardworking will reap enormous benefits because their freedoms will be restored and enhanced. But we can't go back to the couch and say, well, we're going to let Musk, the DOGistas, President Trump, his administration handle it all. No. We have to be on guard. President Trump, what can we do to help? The first thing he'd tell you is educate as many people as you can. Touch as many people with what's really happening, not the propaganda through what's left of the bought-off lamestream fake media. Educate as many people as possible, number one. So we need to step up and say, what can we do to help? And we also have to keep our eye on what's happening with President Trump, with Elon Musk, with the DOGistas, with every aspect, and say, and hold their feet to the fire. A lot of people right now are concerned, very concerned, that there hasn't been a lot of, remember the D word, disclosures. Well, We've had some. But we need more. We have to have an insatiable appetite for disclosures. Because it's until we get through all these disclosures that we can actually move forward in a comprehensive fashion. So keep the heat on with all your elected representatives, local, state, national, about disclosures. Key, absolute key, based on transparency, accountability, and truth. I thank you for joining me today. We are available 24/7 at davejanda.com. Now look, go at a minimum. Go to the website. 3/4 away down the homepage. Look for Tail of the Tape and hit it. 4 minutes long. And after you get done watching it, send it to everyone you know and love. And while you're there, why don't you subscribe? 30 cents a day, $9 a month. It's a month-to-month thing. You don't have to sign up for a year. Month-to-month. Because the content I provide will put you so far ahead of the curve. And look, we got a financial reset here. And you need to know how to protect yourself, how to protect your family. And we go into significant depth in how to do that. I thank you for joining me today. Until next time, Dave Janda signing off. Dream big and dare to fail. Thanks for your time today.